Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast. I am your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful downtown Lowell. Unicare is now WellPoint. New name, same commitment to Massachusetts and to its members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And we thank our friends at WellPoint for helping to make this podcast possible. And we want to thank all of our sponsors here for making all of our podcasts possible. Of course, we mentioned WellPoint, so I don't need to tell you about them again, but I will tell you about Washington Savings Bank. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, our newest member of the Inside Lowell families, from affordable to luxurious, apartments for all. Boston North Company, business solutions for restaurant and retail. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection since 1925. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell trusts, and the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing the action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. And with that, let me welcome in my guest for this podcast. You saw a brief glimpse of him right at the top. He is the executive director. Is it still new executive director?
I think I get a year.
You get a 1 year honeymoon.
Yeah, so I'm not quite there yet.
All right.
No.
The new executive director of LTC, Lowell Telecommunications, Adam McCune, is joining us here in the WellPoint Studios. How are you, Adam?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. It's my first time in the studio, and I think it's such a cool setup. I love this.
Well, we appreciate it because I've crashed your studios many times, and you guys were gracious enough to broadcast our Lowell City Council at-large candidates debate that we did in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce. So I've used your studio a number of times. Glad you can actually come on in here and use ours.
Awesome. Very cool.
So for you've been getting a lot of praise, by the way. I don't want to jinx you or them to jinx you, but you have gotten a lot of praise since you've come in there. It seems like a new energy and a new vision has been infused into what frankly was kind of starting to, kind of fall a little bit backwards in terms of a public resource. And I want to talk about that and all the changes that you've already made, the improvements and kind of where your vision and where you're taking Lowell Telecommunications. But before that, so people know a little bit about you.
Sure.
How did you come to this job? Because you actually started on this side of the microphone, didn't you?
Yes, I was in radio. That was my first love. I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin. And I was on the radio right out of high school, pretty much. I went to Brown Institute, which was an old radio school, where on my entrance exam, they said my accent was too thick. And I actually had to change. In Minneapolis, they said my accent was too thick. So imagine someone telling you have to change your accent, which is, I did. Now, if I'm hanging out with a bunch of people from Wisconsin, I start talking Packers and bag and flag and all that, So, but I do try and it's weird. For a while, I was trying to hide my accent, but now it's just second nature. But yeah, I was in radio. I was doing mornings and was a program director when I was 19 of a little radio station.
Morning radio.
Yep.
You're a survivor.
I am.
A fellow survivor of morning radio.
Yes. I used to do a lot of freelance, stringer work we were rim shot signal to the Twin Cities. So I was about 80 miles outside of Minneapolis. So I would do Wisconsin Radio Network stringer work for when the Brewers would come to town for the Twins. And I would go down and I'd get all these interviews with the players and the coaches, come back and clip it all up and sleep in the studio because I had to get up in a couple hours for my show. So I'm sure you've had those similar experiences, but yeah. Yeah,
we've, anyone in the business knows. And you somehow survived and got into a better kind of field of it. Or is it better though? When you've got, you have all these critics, you have 120,000 critics,
sure,
plus some politicians who all, know the inner workings of how televising events go. So
sure. I always say this, we're not the voice, we're the vessel, so we're just trying to convey what's going out there. And in the scheme of things in city politics, we should be just a neutral party. And I know that can be kind of a lofty goal with any form of media, but we're really just trying to get people out there to produce television. That's what we're supposed to be about. And we're trying to make the best government meetings that we can. That's our purview,
I think it's important to kind of explain to people what public access television is and how it works. What is the principle behind, a properly run, successful public access station as opposed to the commercial stations or pay stations that we've all grown up watching and now end up watching, that all have some type of focus and an agenda, a natural bias behind them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we could go on for hours. I could talk about this, but I think the history of public access is important. The Telecommunications Act that they put forth that brought cable television in 74 and 84 when it was really revamped. What it's all about is those public right-of-ways that physically the cable is coming on. When they were saying, yeah, we want to bring this television on those public right-of-ways, they very clearly decided that, you know what, if you're going to do that, then the public should have some input on television. And I think it was such a novel concept, and it was so forward-thinking, especially for 70s and 80s politics, and they decided to do this. And so our purview is to bring, the creation of television, make it kind of demystified for people and allow them to have their own voice. So it's an actionable arm of the First Amendment. And that's what's really incredible about it. A good public access station should really be a reflection of the community that it serves. And I think it's really wonderful. We have 3 channels, and the school district has an education channel. We operate the 3 channels with public and government, and then we serve with the World Channel because we have such a massive population of Khmer-speaking people. That's mostly that. There's some Portuguese, there's some Spanish. It's actually a very novel concept for public access even, kind of a group that serves niche communities. They really don't have a lot of outside of Spanish language channels in the country. There aren't a whole lot of them. So to have that here it's really kind of a gem in my mind. And I think, right now I'm kind of really focusing in on our government stuff, and the staff has done a great job of helping to implement all that. I think one of our next things is to try and take some of those principles and make some of the shows, help them make better shows for the community that's Khmer speaking.
So how much control do you have over the programming and the content of those programs? If somebody comes forward to you and says, I want to do this program, are you kind of obliged to, offer them the studio space and time when they're available to rent it? Or do you want to know, what, do you have certain standards for what kind of programming you'll run before you actually, because you have to schedule it, and then people get locked into kind of regular time slots as well, right? So how much control do you have over the entire process?
So we don't really exert a lot of control over what they're going to do. Their content is their content. We're there to help them make a better TV show. I worked, before I was here, I worked in Goffstown, New Hampshire. I was there for 8 years, and I used to like to tell people that would come in, especially our political shows, I'm Switzerland. You can talk politics with me. I'm not going to respond in either way. Whether you should not know what my politics are. That would be the best case scenario. But outside of politics too, we really shouldn't, within reason, if there's standards that are being violated, if there's hate speech, those sort of things, we're gonna obviously step in when those kind of things happen. But we really aren't the arbiter of what's good for that. This is your show. We're just here to make you, have a good show for you.
Because it's and this predates you, but there was a morning political show that used to go on. I don't know if you've been brought up to speed on the City Life controversy. Are they back on?
They are
LTC?
back on.
Okay, they are.
So, yep.
Because I while what was said by a guest obviously should not be said on any kind of broadcast, the word it was a guest on the show, and I was a little bit troubled by the fact that the entire show was basically canceled for a time because of something a guest said.
Sure.
What's your philosophy on that, and how? Because you may have these situations going on some of your other shows as well, and some of them are different language shows. So unless somebody calls it to your attention, you don't know. But as we know, in 2024, somebody can always get offended by some type of political speech or angle that somebody has. So what's your general approach in what you'll allow and what you won't allow?
I mean, that instance there, I've spoken with John. I'm actually going to be on John's show next week. They are back on the air.
Good.
The thing that happened there, I'll say this plainly because I think it's fairly public. The incident happened. It wasn't the person, it wasn't the producer of the show that said the awful thing. It was recorded and it re-aired, and we didn't know. In that span of time between us airing and re-airing it, there was about 8 hours. We should have known. And again, this happened before I came on board. We should have known that had happened, and it wasn't known to us. So that was why. It's a major rule that was broken.
So your show producers do have a responsibility.
Absolutely.
If something comes up that could be deemed offensive or controversial, they need to let you know, and you make the decisions, right?
And it's laid out in it pretty clearly in our handbook and set forth by our board. So those are all things that have been laid out for the 30 years that LTC has been around. So yeah, I mean we're not going to come in and say somebody shouldn't say one thing or another politically, but when it kind of goes into the lines of hate speech and a specific word there in that case, that's not cool,
All right. We're chatting with Adam McCune. He is the executive director of Lowell Telecommunications, the new ED, still within his first year. So we're giving him a honeymoon for a couple of more minutes before I ask you about what the hell goes on with those city council broadcasts. But for those out there who are watching this, like, you know what? I've always wanted to do a show. I have a favorite topic. Maybe it's sports, maybe it's gardening, maybe it's a political show. But for somebody watching this, says, I think I could do a show or even a podcast, which are now hot. Yep. What's the process? How do they go about doing it? Are you the guy to approach?
Well, I wouldn't be the guy to approach, but they can certainly approach me. I think that we're all pretty open about that. There's, we have several staff members that can assist people. So if anybody wants to send me an email, it's adam@ltc.org. It's just the shortest email address that you could possibly think of, which is fantastic. But you can send me an email and talk. You have to be a member. Membership is very inexpensive. It's $50 a year, and it's good from the time you sign up to the next year, rather than like calendar year or anything like that. And then you have to do some training. So if you have a bigger production, which we have Studio A for, bigger productions require more people. You have to talk your friends into doing that. So they all have to do the training, and that's a fantastic way to learn. There's like a vocational aspect, I think, to that if you wanted to be a public access employee, this is a good way to start learning that. If you wanted to take it further, also a great place to start. Then we have Studio B, which has been recently revamped, which I'm really trying to make it one-man band. So kind of what you're doing here. We're copying you, Teddy. You can take, it's actually the same. Well, we have one of the same devices that you have, but you can take and
good old,
hit buttons.
This is the Roadcaster.
The Roadcaster,
right?
Yep. We have one of those. But they should be able to affect all their graphics, affect which camera angles, be able to take phone calls, and all do it from sitting in one spot. And I think that's kind of a novel concept in
do you currently have people doing that, right?
Yes.
Because it's a lot of work, the phone calls and all this, but you have people actually doing that kind of program.
So we're easing into this right now. So Talking Sports with Ronnie and Johnny, which they hadn't been on since the pandemic, really. They recently came back this last week. They did their first live show, and you could just see the grins on their faces. Their show's pretty basic, that the way that it runs, and they can one-man band this. And I think, we're going to have more people doing that. We have a show with the Mass Pirates where they come in. 𝒊𝒐𝒔, who I'm sure you know as a character, he comes in and does a show there. And we have the Peter Principal. He's back doing some shows too. So it's already gaining a lot of. I think Studio B will be much more busy than Studio A is for us.
So in mentioning the Massachusetts Pirates, you've also revealed that it's not just individuals, but if a local business or organization is interested in doing something, and you're not going to get to run commercials, but you get to talk about your organization, and the Mass Pirates being a sports team are a great example of that. What about if a private business wants to do something on their field, whether it's an insurance company doing a show, not necessarily promoting the company, but promoting, talking about different types of insurance and how to navigate these. I'm just kind of
sure
spitballing here.
Yeah, we are strictly non-commercial. However, there are ways, and we really haven't done this, I don't think, for a long time, because I've been exploring this too. For underwriting, we haven't done any of that for at least 5 or 10 years that I know of. There can be underwriting. There can't be overt commercials. You can't have a call to action. You can't say, go to this place, and you can't have, a WellPoint sign behind you. That's
not allowed. Yeah. Not even if you put the LTC logo with it. Like
no, there's
logo.
There's certain restrictions. It's supposed to be non-commercial, but I think we're coming into a time, I believe, in public access where that's going to shift a little bit. A lot of that is the contract that the city enters into for the franchise agreement with Comcast. Basically, Comcast doesn't want to compete with themselves. They're sending out a channel that they're not seeing the money on, would be, the business angle of it. They see, Comcast, any of those cable companies, they see us as a line item expense. They don't see much more than that. But yeah, they can't do that. But if an organization or a nonprofit, we have nonprofit memberships. Those are $150 a year. Organizational memberships are $300. They could come in and they could create a television show, much like you're talking about. You have to say why you're an expert in a field. So if you're, I'm an insurance agent and this is what you need to know about this topic. Yeah, they could absolutely do that. A lot of those organizations, though, use our space different. So like we have, I think almost all of the condo associations come and have their annual meeting at our space. It's very popular for that, which is great because we have so much space. Our gallery, where we have artists come in. So there is so much space over there at our facility.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the city council room here.
Okay.
There was a period, and again, it predates you, where although some of the problems still exist, where LTC was getting hammered. It was becoming a regular part of the city council meeting. I almost feel like it was an agenda item every week. Hey, let's critique LTC. It was just audio that was cutting out and audio that is freezing. It was interesting. I was having the same issue because I live in Chelmsford now, so I need to watch you on the stream. And until a friend of mine said, go, little workaround here, go to their YouTube channel, which is actually Lowell Telemedia on YouTube.
LTC, LTC Lowell MA.
Yeah, and it will not. You will not miss a thing. It'll work perfectly. And knock on wood, that's what I have found. So that's how I watch all my city council meetings now. What is being done? What has been done to address these technical concerns? And do you have a time frame for when all of it can be rectified?
Yeah, I think a lot of those little technical quirks have been fixed. There are still some. We're working with the city because it's, the city's facility and gear, and they've been pushing for that too. So we have to there's massive pieces of gear that run everything. And without something in place to be a backup, you can't even bring that thing out. We'd have to bring in somebody specifically here. And it's these little BNC SDI connectors that go out. That's precisely the issue there. And we have to have that sent out. So we don't have a replacement to be able to broadcast a meeting from, in the way that we'd want to. So in order to do that fix, it's a big undertaking. We're getting there. And I'd hope by the time summer hits, we're going to have all of that squared away, or it's in process.
Well, summer's hitting in a month and another week or so.
June is their schedule for summer meetings. So yeah.
Is it an issue of outdated equipment or adding? Because I know they've added different components through the years to the kind of original setup. And for those who've never worked in the business, the technology in video and audio just kind of changes.
It's really
at the snap of the fingers, and suddenly things that work perfectly suddenly become incompatible.
Yeah.
So are you dealing with some of that as well?
No, I think most of the gear that's in there is exceptionally new. And I think that there are still a few kinks to work out. The big shift that's happened in video is everything has went from a physical cable, which was kind of a pain, to be honest. I always say that if purgatory exists, it's a guy wrapping a cable forever. And I'm glad to see those go away, to be honest. But what has shifted is it's become a network thing. So all the cameras are networked, all the computers are networked. And, video people are not IT people. So it's hard for them to grasp. It's hard for me to grasp like what's going on with network stuff. It's kind of a mystery. But, when I talk to high schoolers that are talking about going into video production, I always tell them, when you go to college, make sure you take a systems administration course, because it will help you, because it's all going online and it's all doing that. So yeah, there's a lot of things to kind of work through and figure out, but knock on wood, for the most part, it's been good. We'll have, any issue that comes up, we're right away. We're in communication with the city about, just so they're aware and that they're aware that we're aware,
So that said, how do you determine what equipment you're going to purchase and what you'll upgrade and whatnot? Because the technology does constantly change, and there's a lot of different ways to deliver video and audio to people. And it's almost kind of like, betting on do you go VHS or beta, or do you go macro versus mini computers, which we're very familiar with here in Lowell from the Wang situation back there. But ultimately, you're going to find some level in the position you're in of, he's using taxpayer dollars and they can't get equipment that works, blah, blah, blah. How do you make those determinations of what equipment you're going to invest in and what technologies you're going to invest in?
Sure. That's a good question, because there's a lot of choices out there, just like you said. A lot of it is based on experience, where it's gear that I've used. And I came in here and in our neck of the woods in our industry, a lot of the gear is similar. People kind of choose the same things. You kind of have to go with an ecosystem. It's like a phone, I've got an iPhone. I have a Mac computer. The round trip between all the Apple devices is so much easier if you're doing that. So you kind of have to stick to an ecosystem. If it's new, it's not necessarily better. I'd rather let someone else beta test something and not have it go wrong. Yeah. So I try to stick with pieces that have been tried and true, because I don't want to have problems. I don't want to inherit problems necessarily either.
So how is your program accessible? So folks who want to catch some of the programming on LTC, how can they access it?
If you're a Comcast subscriber in Lowell, you get the channels there. You get 6/8/26. Those are where our channels are at. If you go to ltc.org, you can see the streams of each of those channels as well. Everyone starting this year, I think we started January, or was it might have been, I think it was January. We started streaming every meeting we produce from City Hall is streamed live on YouTube, our YouTube channel, LTC Lowell MA. You can find us there. You can just search LTC and you'll find us, Litecoin, and License to Carry, I think, on YouTube. But you'll find us, especially if you search for us or search for a city council meeting. Those are online. Those are live, and you can see those anytime there.
You didn't say app. Phone-based app.
We don't have an app. No.
Okay. Is that something that? Because I find phones don't work as well as laptops for certain things. Is that something that is there even a public access channel in America that has?
There is.
So it does exist.
Yeah, it does exist. A lot of the people who make the broadcast servers for public access, they make a lot of apps you can buy as an add-on. And we may be upgrading our server in the very near future. It's a possibility. I'm not sold on it necessarily yet. I'm big on accessibility. That's really a big part of what we're supposed to be doing. But I'm not sure that that's the right way. I do think, though, however, that there is a lot of second screening for things. I think that people are maybe watching at home. They're watching the TV, and they may have the agenda on their phone or a laptop or a tablet right next to them. And I've been thinking about that when we're doing some of the graphical things that we've been doing. So, kind of follow along at home. Here's where we're at on the agenda, if you're wondering.
And so two things. Number one, if you do find an app that you think works, please let me know. Only because people have been kind of talking to me about you should get an InsideLowell app.
Yeah.
Kind of, it's not. I don't think it's quite right yet for this, but if that changes,
and it's a big undertaking. That's
of
a lot.
course it is. Yeah.
You know, even a website is a lot to run. So it's like now an app on top of that. Yeah. So
all right. So I want to wrap it up by talking about some of the positives that have changed. That the meetings look a lot better.
Well, that's good.
And that's is it simply a graphics package? Because it almost makes like the cameras look crisper for some reason. I don't know if my eye is distracted by the fancier graphics, but it's a much more pleasant to the eye experience now watching the meetings than it was before.
I appreciate that. It was a big effort that we undertook. A lot of it is graphical, you know, simply presenting the information. I think our old graphics were really hard to read, and they were small type. And you know, if you're streaming it, maybe it's easier to see, but if you're on a standard definition television set, which people still have, it's much harder to see that. So that was a big consideration, just being able to present the room in a little different way. So when I first started talking with this, you know, to the staff about this, we kind of made the change that it wasn't going to be just the graphics that would change. We would change how we do our cameras a little bit too. So it's crisper because we're closer. I want to try and avoid, you know, 3 people in a shot, and you got one person sitting like that. You've got somebody picking their nose. Yeah, it's happening in the room. I guess we could broadcast that, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to, you know, here's the person talking, and having their name up there is more important than anything. And yeah, anything that happens in that room, I guess, is kind of fair game. But just trying to, that's the picking your nose rule that I was talking about.
So you did adjust the camera angles slightly. Okay, so it does look different.
You're not going crazy.
I'm not imagining it, okay. Because I'm old and some of these things run by me. What else do you have planned? What else is coming?
We're going to add a couple of cameras in there. I'm really big on when there's a vote, I want to see everybody while they vote. And I think that's a fair thing to put. So we don't really have... And if you've been in the meeting room at City Hall, it's kind of a box, and it's a tall box, but it's really doesn't have a lot of depth. A lot of meeting rooms kind of are rectangular. This is the kind of thing that you notice when you start working in public access. I think there's a lot of rectangular rooms, or they kind of have this big oval. There isn't a lot of space in there. So we have to get a camera with a wide angle lens so we can kind of see the whole room, to see what's going on, you know, for establishing shot, if you want to get into that, plus when they're voting. So, and then, you know, the staff was telling me about like our school committee meetings, the way those are set up. There's 3 tables across the front. It's really hard to get the mayor and those tables. So it's like, well, if we had another camera back there, I'm like, well, we can add. So we're going to add a couple of cameras there. I would really love to see, in the future, going to see if we can work with City Hall about getting maybe a camera down in the lobby, because a lot of flag raising ceremonies and other things happen there. And I go on our YouTube page, I check out the analytics and all that stuff. Those are very popular. So those get watched a lot on YouTube, sometimes more than you know, a 48-minute city council meeting might. So you know, if people are watching it, I want to put some effort into it, you know, kind of match that level of enthusiasm a little bit, and doing it live is big.
Can you get a camera on an outside window so you can get the protesters when they're out there as well? Because there was a period there where the sound was bleeding into the council meeting. It'd be fun to kind of see that going on.
We probably could. I don't know if we'd put a lot of effort into that one though, you know.
All right, Adam McCune, the executive director of Lowell Telecommunications. If folks want to learn more, please give us the web address and also that shortest email in the history of mankind.
Adam@ltc.org. And LTC.org is, of course, our website. So,
all right. Well, thank you for joining us here at in the Well Point Studios, and keep up the good work. You really have, out for all the ribbing I kind of gave you there, and you guys have. I can sense an energy in there that hasn't existed in a while, and hopefully a stability at the top, because they were going through executive directors like I go through candy on Halloween for a while. So.
Yeah, I'd like to be here to stay, honestly. So,
yeah, well, let's make that happen. Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Adam McCune, and thanks to you as well for joining us here on this latest Inside Lowell podcast. As we like to say, Inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place. Till next time, stay safe.